Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Rally Point. This month's show is dedicated to the many women who serve and have served in our armed forces. March is Women's Veterans Month, and we are honored to have with us today one of Somerville's own, Alicia Redden, who will join us here in the studio as she tells of her experience in service and how she's continuing the mission to assist our families, our veterans and their families, rather, as well as a potential political run in 2020. We have a lot of information for you, so let's get at it. Well, after a crazy beginning to March, spring has finally sprung, and we're looking towards to an event-packed spring. March came in like a lion with an unprecedented 4 nor'easters in 3 weeks. But as the snow melts and the days get a little warmer, let's take a look at some of the things coming up here in Somerville. First of all, the Somerville Office of Military Affairs and Veteran Services is still located at the Somerville Council on Aging at 167 Holland Street, and we're quite comfortable there and want to thank especially the Executive Director of the Council on Aging, Cindy Hickey, and her staff for making Kathy and I feel right at home. There's no updates as of yet on when we might be going back to the annex, but for now we're enjoying ourselves just where we are, right there with the Council on Aging. And I got to tell you, there's a lot going on at the Council on Aging, a lot of trips, a lot of events, and Cindy and her staff do a wonderful job making sure that our seniors are engaged and they always have something to do. And for me personally, it's always great to be able to go down and have lunch with some of our seniors when they have a lot of those luncheons, which they always have. It's fantastic. Also, I'd like to thank Cindy for having me on her show, Senior Circuit, this month. And I have to tell you, as I said before, there's a lot going on at the Council on Aging. And one of the most important things that are coming up, especially for our veterans, is going to be our trip to Washington, D.C., October 1st through the 5th. That's October 1st through the 5th, so mark that on your calendar. And if you'd like to join us for a wonderful week in our nation's capital, just call the Council on Aging or just reach out to me at my office at the Council on Aging. On March 26th, the first community meeting for the Henry Hansen Memorial Park redesign was held at the Lowell Street V&A, with a dozen concerned neighbors showing up to voice their support of improving the appearance and functionality of this small pocket park, which is located at the corner of Partridge and Medford Streets in Magoon Square. As you recall, last month, we dedicated our show to the memory of Marine Corps Sergeant Hank Hansen and his heroic acts at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Keep an eye out for news on the next meeting as we move closer to unveiling the redesign of this important and wonderful park. With May quickly approaching, it's time to begin talking about the Somerville Memorial Week events that will be held beginning on May 19th and go through Memorial Day, which is May 28th. We're working on putting all the information on the city's website, so keep an eye out for updates on the many events coming up. One of the highlights of Memorial Week is the Somerville Veterans Memorial Parade. This year's parade continues with the theme of honoring our past and engaging our future. This year, we welcome back the Aleppo Shriners with a full contingent, as well as many local groups. One of the highlights of the parade is we're welcoming new veterans organizations to include Team Red, White, and Blue, as well as Team Rubicon that will be joining us as we march down Highland Ave. These organizations are a change from the traditional veterans organizations as they specialize in a particular interest. Team Red, White, and Blue focuses on health and fitness, and Team Rubicon is composed of veterans who actually deploy in time of crisis and national emergency to aid Red Cross and emergency personnel, helping to save lives. We're also honored to have members of the American Legion, VFW, and disabled American veterans who join us as well. The parade is poised to be one of the biggest as we honor the service and sacrifice of our military and our veterans. The parade will take place on Sunday, May 20th, and will begin at 3 p.m., not 1 p.m. as it has been in the past, but 3 p.m. we will start off from City Hall. There's so much more information that we're going to be sharing with you as we go through coming up shows. Next month especially, we're going to roll out a lot of information for our Memorial Week. But in the meantime, sit back and relax. We'll be back in a few moments and show you a video that really honors the pride and the tradition of women who've served in our armed forces.
This was 1942. We were not expected to go up to the front the way the women do today.
In Vietnam, women had a much different role than men. Today, all that's gone. Those lines have been erased.
I was serving in Iraq, and I was flying a Black Hawk helicopter.
They are a completely different breed of women. I admire them greatly.
These women are resilient, they're intelligent, they have experience.
It's time that we stop being surprised that America's daughters are just as capable of defending freedom and liberty as America's sons.
This was 1942, and of course the war was in full swing. They were recruiting women because they needed more men to go to the front.
While I was in nurses training, we received visits from several recruiting officers. They needed to find nurses to fill the slots in Vietnam, in the hospitals in Vietnam.
I was a graduate student, and I found that I was attracted to friends who were all military, and they encouraged me to take some ROTC classes.
Quite frankly, it seemed like a wonderful opportunity to not be poor while I was in school, but also I didn't have to worry about getting a job when I got out of school.
This war was something that we just had to win, and that's probably one of the reasons I wanted to join up and do my share.
And I loved it. I loved the leadership, I loved the challenges, and so I decided to go for my commission.
I enlisted as a private, but we did not come in as regular Army recruits. We came in as auxiliaries. We did not get the same training as the men at all. We, of course, got nowhere near the battlefront.
I got a call and found that I had orders for Vietnam. And I thought, well, you know, how bad could Vietnam be for nurses? We worked in the hospital. Emergency rooms here in this country never could have prepared us for what we saw. It's hard to, in your mind, picture what the body actually looks like when it's torn apart. That never leaves you.
I selected aviation as a result of the policy banning women from serving in combat. So I felt that if I was going to have equal rank and equal pay to my male counterparts, that I wanted to take equal risk. I was serving in Iraq as part of an aviation battalion, a task force, and I was flying a Black Hawk helicopter. We were 10 feet above the treetops when we flew basically into a barrage of gunfire. And one of the RPGs hit us. It exploded in my lap. It vaporized my right leg and amputated my left and took off most of my right arm. I recovered at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I was surrounded by other wounded warriors. We all had the same mission, which was we all wanted to get well and go back to our units. What I'm doing now is essentially what I did in the hospital, which is continue to take care of my buddies and of our warriors after, they've served this nation.
Historically, women were not really recognized as veterans. The Center for Women Veterans was first established in 1994 by Congress, and the purpose of that was to monitor the programs and services that VA offered to women veterans. There's been a lot of changes over the years, but there still needs to be education to really help people understand the contributions of women.
In 1943, there was a turnover, and we became legally part of the Army as the Women Army Corps. We were very proud of the fact that they thought enough of us to make us part of the regular Army.
And I wish someone had said that to me before I went over. Do you know you're going to be a part of history? Not only because of being in Vietnam, but because of being a woman veteran at that time.
I could not have become a Black Hawk helicopter pilot in 1993 had the WACs not been there, had the nurses in Vietnam not been there in the thick of the fighting. I stand on their shoulders.
On the role of women in Iraq and Afghanistan, I've got nothing but admiration for the women there. They're no longer in isolated barracks. They're up in the front. They're just as important as the men now.
And I think the women of today realize how much sacrifice was made by the women that came before them. And they also know that they're laying the groundwork for a lot of the women that are still yet to come.
Think about the young women out there. So they say to themselves, if she did that, I can do that, I can do more.
When I walk into a meeting with other men who are at the very highest levels, they know I'm a combat vet. That argument just goes right off the table. Now let's talk about what we need to talk about to get the job done. There's no need to compare who is in combat and who's not, because I've been there.
War is war is war. It's dirty, it's painful, there's human lives lost, and that's one thing that's shared by anyone who served in the military. And when somebody says they were in a war, no matter what, we know we're connected.
Welcome back to Rally Point. I am so excited today to have with me a good friend of mine and a fellow colleague in the Veteran Services world and a former resident here in Somerville, Somerville High School class of 2003. Such a youngster she is. Served in the United States Navy from 2006 to 2008 on active duty, and then from 2008 to 2014 in the active reserve. Very interesting career that I'm going to let her tell you all about. But now she spends her time between being a supermom as well as being the Director of Veteran Services for the town of Andover. She's been in the Veteran Services world probably a little bit under a decade, but she's picking up steam and moving and maybe even taking a political run in 2020. We are so glad to have with us today Alicia Redden. Alicia, you know, I don't have to be formal with you. We're friends.
Yep.
We've worked on several projects together. You're very big in the Massachusetts Veteran Service Officer Association. Yep. Served as secretary, treasurer, president, vice president, you know, king and almighty God. Yeah, what's been going on? Well, first of all, let's go back.
Yep.
Let's go back to 2003 when you were, you know, terrorizing the halls of Somerville High School.
I don't know about terrorizing.
Oh, are you telling me now that you were like just a good girl?
I was very quiet. I did actually keep to myself. I was a culinary arts major, so I spent most of my time down in the Voc.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. I love the Highland Cafe. It's
great.
really good. You
Yep.
know, hey folks, I'll plug this for them. You know, if you're ever looking for a great meal at a great price, go see the folks over at Highland Cafe. Okay, that's my plug, my commercial for today.
It's actually how I met my husband, which is the funniest thing. We were both students together in the culinary program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a small world.
It is a very small world. So let's talk about Navy. Why Navy? Being an Air Force person, I always like to ask these
So
questions.
my dad was Air Force, and he always, I know, right? A little bit of me, I think I was just like, no, I don't need to go in the Air Force. I'm going to do something different.
Right.
So the weekend of Memorial Day, I went into Malden, and on Friday afternoon, I went in to see the recruiter, and on Saturday afternoon, I was on a plane on my way to Great Lakes.
Holy smokes.
I did not think it through even a little bit. I had no plan. I
I've
went in
known
there.
you for a minute. That sounds about right.
It does sound like what I would do. It was
Yeah.
very impulsive, and I just thought, hey, let's do something. I was working at Good Times. Do you remember Good Times?
Really? Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that forever, and I wasn't looking at college. It just wasn't for me at the time,
Right.
and so I
Well-
took a jump.
Yeah, so that was good. So you did the Navy. My dad was Navy, so I joined the Air Force.
Yes.
And he basically, when I told him I joined the military, I didn't say what branch, and he goes, oh, the Navy's going to be great for you. And I said, well, I didn't join the Navy. And he's like, well, the Marine Corps has a lot of great programs. I go, no. He
No.
goes, Army? Going, he's like, oh, God, you joined the Chair Force. And I'm like, yeah, I did.
That's me.
Which means that translates to, we'll have a job when I get out.
Yes.
Joined for 4 years and stayed for 20. But
I went in with the thought of doing 20, and after 4, I was like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go now.
oh yeah, says I'm done. So what did you do? What did you do in the Navy?
So I went in as a heavy equipment operator. So when I went in to see the recruiter, I took my test and I scored really high in everything. The only thing they said I could not do was nuclear missiles, which, like, what a pity, because that's
launch for you. Okay.
Yeah, always my dream.
Yeah.
So they were like, "Do you like trucks?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Trucks are cool. I live in New England. We have trucks, right?"
Sure.
They're like, "All right, well, we have equipment operator, CBs, John Wayne movie," and I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Fine, cool,
Sure.
right? How hard could it be?
Wow.
So that was interesting. It was a big change.
So you did your time. You were in Guam, supporting OEF, during the war of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, so we made, I worked in a rock quarry and I ran a rock crusher. So I don't know if anybody watched the Flintstones as a kid, where he kind of just made big rock into little rock and little rock into smaller rock into pebbles, and then slid down the dinosaur. That was kind of like my average day. And we would ship that gravel over to Iraq and Afghanistan for the CBs to make roads.
Oh, gotcha.
So that the Marine Corps could get in and out of some of the more desolate areas to bring, mutual aid and things like that.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
It was cool.
Yeah, so it's like join the Navy and see a rock quarry, so that's really cool.
Exactly, and I was stationed in Gulfport, Mississippi, so I've really seen all of.
I was at Keesler for a while, so
My daughter was born there.
Yes,
Yeah,
knew the place very well. So let's say post Navy time, you got into Veteran Services world. But before we talk about that, our show this month is Women Veterans Month. So women serving in the armed forces, has been going on since time immemorial. But there are issues that happen with women who are in the military that are totally, not totally confined to them, but it's a large proportion of it. How were you perceived as a woman who, for all practical purposes, was in a man's job?
Yep.
We hate to say that these days, but but seriously, you would think heavy equipment operator, you think working in a rock quarry, things like, you think male dominated. How was that, and how did you perceive your work in them, and how did they perceive you?
So it's absolutely, I hate to say that it's a man's job, but it really was. Women weren't even allowed in these units up until the late 80s. So I was probably one of the first handful of women that were even in that unit as a female out in the Alpha Company, which is the equipment operators and mechanics. And I think that for both of us, it was a huge change. I'm very lucky that I grew up pretty gritty, right? So I grew up in East Somerville, and I have a thick skin, even though I was quiet. So I was able to deal with a lot of the kind of heckling, but I think it was also a little bit confusing for the guys in the unit because they had just never had a female around. It was to the point where when I checked into my unit, there wasn't even female barracks at that point because I was the only one, and they were like, "You don't get a building." So very unfortunate. I feel like I should have gotten a building.
Did they put you in a tent, or
So what they did was our barracks rooms were two rooms that like two bedrooms. And a bathroom. Okay. And I had to have the whole thing to myself, which is not the worst, except you have to clean it all, and you're responsible for inspections on everything.
Gotcha.
But I was alone in essentially a 4-bedroom apartment because they could not house any males anywhere near me. And they had a good friend of mine who is now, he runs housing at VA Bedford for VNOC.
Oh, okay.
Was across from me, and he was there to babysit me almost to make sure that I was safe, because they did not know what to do having a woman kind of checking into the barracks and on the same floor and walking by each other. So it was a huge learning curve. And, there are issues throughout the entire military, and we're hearing a lot of, MST conversations. And I can't stress enough that isn't only a female concern. There are men that are subjected to the same amount of sexual harassment and sexual assault. And we're hoping that people start coming forward and reporting those instances more and more. I was fortunate with the group of people that I was with, and I grew very close to many of them. So, and we're still friends now.
Oh, good.
But it was a lot. I'm glad I had brothers.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I grew up playing
really
sports.
prepared you,
And because I don't know that I would have been prepared for the level of nasty. You guys are gross. You're just gross.
Hey, don't loop me into that.
Oh, my God.
That brings us to Veteran Services work. We're talking, MST, this is military sexual trauma. It is very prevalent. a lot of times you find situations where subordinate, it's harassment or sexual assault from superiors to subordinate, or peer to peer, but people tend to swallow that and they don't talk about it. You know, we're always told when we're in the military to soldier on, just, you know, let it go. And I think that what we are seeing now in the veteran services world are those people starting to come out of the woodwork. So when we're filing claims on MST, when we're filing claims on, you know, people who have psychological and emotional and physical, you know, illnesses based on that type of trauma and stress, it is more prevalent. I tell a story of when I worked for the VA and I was doing claims. I got a handwritten letter from a 93-year-old man who wrote in for a claim for MST from 1941, and he was raped in basic training at Great Lakes. You know, so it's like, oh my God. This, I mean, and you know how people who have that articulate handwriting, it was 5 pages long. And he chronicled what happened to him and then how his life, divorce after divorce, substance abuse, you know, domestic abuse. It was just so heart-wrenching.
And to think that he carried that
his entire
all
life.
that time.
Absolutely. And I don't think that we really can articulate or even evaluate the depth of issues like that. And it's just not the military. You know, we're finding now, listening to the news, you know, all kinds of things that are coming out, whether it be, you know, in the entertainment world, whether it be in politics, whether it be, you know, it's everywhere we go. And people that you look up to throughout your entire life, you know, Matt Lauer, you know, as a journalist and as someone who, you know, loves the journalistic side of things myself, and to hear that. And it's just not one, it's several instances of those things happening. And then, of course, you have military leaders who do the same thing. I mean, tailhook. I mean, that's one of the most infamous. Sorry, your service owns that. But it is really difficult. You know, here in Massachusetts, we have the Women's Veterans Network.
Yes.
Now, do you do any work with what is her name?
I believe it's Gail now that's taken
Gail.
over since Viviana stepped back. I try to attend as much as I can. I don't do a ton with the Women's Veteran Network because they really have a handle on this. So where I'm focusing a lot of my efforts is getting out into the community and creating those conversations.
Good.
Those conversations need to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And they don't only need to happen within the veteran community, you're right. They also need to happen in the active duty side. They need to happen in the civilian space. And we all just need to be a little bit more aware. In the past 12 months, I've seen military leaders that both you and I know be relieved of posts. And, you know, people that I've grown to respect immensely over the years. And it shakes you, right? It makes you question your own judgment on what is happening around you.
Absolutely.
And the other thing we're seeing is I'm doing a lot of work in veteran treatment court. That's huge for me. So we have a couple of cases where I mentor some local veterans that have had some run-ins with the law because of substance abuse. And there's quite a few of them that their substance abuse really does stem back to sexual trauma, combat sexual trauma, which is, you know, the worst of both worlds.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm spending a lot of my time, is kind of getting into the courts. We have veteran treatment courts in Lawrence. We have one in Boston. Framingham has one, and I believe Holyoke is the other one. And we're continuing to expand that. What kills me is that people are living all this time and holding all this baggage, and it's ruining marriages, and it's ruining families, and it's ruining careers, and it's destroying people from the inside out.
It was also precipitating into suicides too.
Absolutely.
I honestly do believe that the correlation between these instances and veteran suicide is very high.
Yep.
And I think as we study this more, we're going to find out more about what's going on out there.
It's very easy for us to assume that it's substance abuse related when we're willing to stop looking at the point where we find out it's substance abuse related. It's taking that extra step to dig a little bit further that's going to show us that correlation. I completely agree. I think that that's a strong link.
Right. And I think with what Alicia's talking about, if you or someone you know has experienced military sexual trauma, or someone who's just in trouble, any of our veterans out there who are in trouble, please, please, please reach out to us. Reach out to your local veteran service officer, whether it's here in Somerville or whatever town that you might be living in. But just don't turn around and walk away from it. Don't think that it's going to get better. if you know someone who's in trouble, it's up to all of us to ensure that our veterans and their families are taken care of. Alicia?
So something else to add, just if you're not comfortable with your veteran service officer, right? If you're somebody who's not talking to a female or not talking to a male, you can come to any of us. You know, there's a whole network of us. If you walk into my office and you say, I'm not comfortable filing this with you, I'd like a male, I have a network of those people that can step in and help. And you have that network.
Absolutely.
We have networks of people if you're not comfortable talking to us directly. So please reach out. If I can't help you, I will find you the person that can. Same with Bryan.
Absolutely. 2020.
Yes. That's coming so fast.
That's, you know, we have midterms coming up in
We do.
2018.
We do.
Which is, I think, is just going to be incredible.
I'm watching. I'm watching
You know, I think
I'm
everyone,
very excited.
even people who are just like, I'm done with politics, they're like, oh, this is going to be cool.
Yeah.
But 2020, let's fast forward. You know, there's rumblings in the world out there that you might be making a political run for state rep.
This is true.
Out of
Bill
glorious Bill Ricka,
Yes.
which, as we always say here at Somerville with trees.
Which is funny because I've never heard Somerville called Bill Ricka without trees, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that is.
I don't think the migration is two ways.
No.
Most people who, and I've talked to some
go
people in
up.
Somerville, it says it always goes there and stays there.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
Yeah. It's because I find that I like the trees and the quiet, right? As much as I miss the echoes of Sullivan Station behind my bedroom door, you know, I kind of like the quiet.
Absolutely.
Yes, I am living in the 22nd Middlesex District, and I had initially been looking at a political run in 2018 and decided to hold, but 2020 is coming, and it's coming fast, and I'm watching very closely. I'm watching very, very closely at what our current representative is doing. I'm watching very closely at the governor and how he is looking at policies related to substance abuse, related to gun reform, related to women's rights, and related to veteran services. We, as you know, this is, we're in our rewrite for our own veteran services laws here in Massachusetts. So I'm following every pen stroke very closely in that. And yeah, I think it's time. We don't have enough veterans at the State House. I think there's 4, maybe
Yep,
4.
there is room for more.
There's always room for more. And there's how many female veterans at the State House? I'm pretty sure there's no elected at the moment.
I don't think there are none elected right now, but there's one on the rise. So,
Yes. Yep.
So we'll see what happens in 18.
It's definitely time for us to have our voices heard and for us to start pushing policies. As a veteran, I think it's really important to talk about specifically gun reform. That's something that I've been wanting to talk about, and the fact that, you know, I have children in school too. You know,
Exactly.
I went to school in the days of Columbine, so I have a very firm stance on gun reform. I think it's time.
Well, I agree with you, and I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. You're just getting your feet wet in Andover. But I love that place. I used to live there.
That explains why you keep mentioning places that I don't know yet.
Exactly. I used to live down in the Vale, so it's
Okay.
it's great to have you out there. It's great to know you. It's great for you to be my friend, and wish you luck in your new position there.
And you keep taking care of Somerville for me, huh?
Oh yes,
Okay.
very much so. We've got it going.
4 generations in this community, and I love that you're taking care of them.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with some final words.
America's service members and veterans are strong, forged out of bravery, sacrifice, and duty. From all corners of the country, a family for life. But whether they served in lands far away or communities close to home, some of these men and women may face difficult times or even crisis. But sometimes reaching out for help can be the most challenging and worthwhile mission of all. Thankfully, friends, family, and communities are standing by their service members and veterans now more than ever. We're all in this together. When you recognize something isn't right, make the call to the Veterans Crisis Line or Military Crisis Line. During times of crisis, reach out and call. Dial 1-800-273-8255 and press 1.
As we all know, it takes so many to ensure that our country remains safe and free. This month, during Women's Veterans Month, we pause to thank those women who have put their country first and have been able to join together with their brothers to make America free. and to keep us strong. Let us never forget the impact of not only our women veterans, but all veterans, as we continue while on active duty to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States, and as we come out of the military and come back into our communities, we become a valuable part of the fabric of those communities. We are so blessed here in Somerville to have so many who've served our country and still continue to serve in whatever capacity that they deem fit, whether it be a police officer, a firefighter, a veterans advocate, or just a concerned citizen who wants to ensure that their children's lives are better than the ones that they had. For all of us here at Rally Point, have a great month, have a happy Easter, a happy Passover, and we'll see you again next month as we take a look at the Veterans Post, the American Legion, the VFW, the DAV, with our very special guest, the VFW Commander, Bobby Hardy. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great one.